Amazing, amazing. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on this beautiful weathered day. I know it's very sunny outside, so we appreciate you joining us online. My name is Jess Bulge, and I am the project and communication facilitator here at Startup Shakeup. And we also have our CEO, Elena Young, joining us from Startup Shakeup as well. If you are new to Startup Shakeup and you haven't experienced any of our events in person or online or any of our programs before, we are a community of innovators, entrepreneurs, business people wanting to shake it up a little bit, located within Northeast Victoria. We have a range of different events and programs that we put on all year long. And so we really encourage you to keep an eye out, follow us on social, subscribe to our newsletter, all of the above, so you can keep up to date with what's happening in our world and how we can assist you in any way that you would like to be innovative or shake things up within your community, organization, or business. So I'm just accepting people in as I talk. So if I seem a little bit, all right, amazing.
Would you like me to take over, Jess?
Yeah, if you would like. The conversation today will be between Georgie and Elena. So I will hand over to Elena to get the conversation started. And Elena, just before you do that, I am going to just do our acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the many First Nation peoples who are the owners and custodians of the land on which we are meeting today. They have been living, learning with, and caring for these lands for many thousands of years. I would also like to pay my respect to the elders past, present, and also emerging, for they hold the knowledge and the wisdom, and it is together that we'll create a world worth living in. Thank you, Elena.
Fantastic. Beautifully said, Jess. Thank you. So, who is our guest today? Well, Georgie Drury is an experienced and successful founder and investor. We're delighted to see you here. She specialises in scaling and commercialising ventures and startups. Her background is in management consulting and technology, and then in 2008, this led to her establishing Springday, which was a platform designed to help reduce health risks and improve wellbeing. By 2019, Springday was a multi-million-dollar cloud-based program deployed by organisations across 13 countries in the Asia Pacific. And now today, having successfully exited Springday, moved on to the next thing, Georgie is co-founding a venture studio and fund focused on digital health. Obviously committed to health and wellbeing, she's a sought-after keynote speaker and advisor. We're delighted to have her here today. She loves sport and health herself. She gets involved in anything from skiing to sailing, including the Sydney to Hobart yacht race, and also gives back to the community. Has a fantastic puppy and mentors female founders and young women in the Tech Girls Are Superheroes competition. So delighted to welcome you here today. Thank you for joining us, Georgie.
Thank you for having me. And I will preempt that I do have a puppy who should be asleep and I'm home alone. So she's on my lap wanting attention. It's always the way it works.
Absolutely. So Georgie, can you tell us, how did your innovation journey begin?
So I feel that I was one of these children. So my father had his own company, and it was just how I grew up. Dad would go to work. He was the boss. He had his own company. And I remember being 12 years of age and saying to Dad, look, I need some more pocket money. And he literally said, come and work for me. And so the path for me to have my own company through, obviously, the visibility of my father doing it, it was always something that I was going to do. I then had some extremely entrepreneurial friends when I was in my last final years of school doing some really cool stuff, and some of them are fellow founders in New York and around the place. And so we got together and almost created innovation hubs within some of the corporates here in Australia, which was really super early days. And so it was always a roughly west strategy that I was taking, that I always knew that I needed to do my own thing. I then went to uni. Traditionally, that's what we did. And then after that, I became a management consultant. Whilst I was at uni, though, I set up my first business, which was teaching speech, drama and communications in the private school system here in Sydney, because I could make more money, had more flexibility than waitressing for $20 an hour. So going back, that was the first thing that I was wanting to do. Then in management consulting, I got a little bit disillusioned. I think to take high-performing students, put them into the management consulting world, I got quite bored. And I also thought, if I'm going to work this bloody hard, I'll do it for myself. But as a good strategy consultant, I did a strategy piece and it said people want well-being. And so by well-being, we defined it under the 5 pillars. So physical, social, emotional, financial, and career. And so that was probably the nexus, the first piece of work that I did to, get us to launching Springday.
So tell me, thinking back right now then to these very early days, what was it like stepping into that entrepreneurial space for the first time?
So it's a really interesting question because I still struggled with calling myself an entrepreneur back then. So yes, I was a business owner, but this is way before, if you think about 2008, way before the concept of entrepreneurship and, the raising and the services and the ecosystem that's supporting us today. Like this call that I'm on did not exist going back into 2008. And so you really were this lone wolf walking through, trying to navigate your way through. And it gave you the opportunity just to sort of pave your way forward. But it was very clear, and the problem I was looking to solve, we sort of validated it with the research that we'd done. And so we thought, well, maybe there is something here that it's time to go and explore.
And I can really relate to that. I started my own business when I was 24 in the UK, and it really was, you were the outsider rather than being the insider. So for you, when you were starting your business in those early days, what sorts of things made the difference and enabled and empowered you to do it?
Oh, winning customers. So if I think back to, so if you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people that can sort of sense that you're on the right journey, and I call it a roughly west journey, we're sort of heading in the right direction. You need to obviously pivot, listen to your customers. There's so many things and variables that can pave the way of whether you're successful or not successful. But I really think that we launched Springday as a consumer platform. So selling, B2C or direct to consumer is now called. And we launched through the Lululemon clothing brand store. So we had support of Lululemon, which was newly founded company on the Australian shores. So yes, it's Canadian, but there was only about 6 or 8 shops in the whole of Australia at the time. And they said, this is very much in line with what we're wanting to do. So we will help you and support you and have these launch parties. So then we did launch. I ended up with 25,000 women up and down the eastern seaboard, and they were predominantly 80% were women, saying, this is fantastic. I love wellbeing. And then they all turned around and said, but I don't want to pay for it. And I'm like, right. And so I think that is the catalyst and the big thing in digital health at the moment, who is paying for all this stuff. They said, I want to pay for weight loss. And I was like, I don't want to be a weight loss company. So who does want to pay for wellbeing? And at the time I met Steph O'Brien, who was the wellbeing manager of AGL. And I said, can I white label my tech stack for you to deploy across AGL? And she said, absolutely. So that's going back into 2012. So from launching a consumer business in 2008, I've also got 2 kids. The first one was born in 2010. So trying to be this solo female founder, doing all this stuff by yourself, including having children, a lot of people looking at me thinking I'm absolutely crazy. But there was always the next nugget of information or the next milestone, or there was the little goals that you could set yourself that you were slowly achieving and winning to think there is a business here, and I'm happy to keep exploring it.
And you've mentioned a number of times, so when you first started being somebody who was doing something different, and then when you were a solo female founder, how important do you think it's been to you in that journey, having a sort of a supportive network of family and friends around you?
So I think there's 2 parts to that. One is, yes, you need your family and friends to support you, to believe that you're moving in the right direction. But the second thing is having expert advice around you, which I did not get early enough. So there could have been a whole range of different things that I could have done differently. And I actually encourage women not to be solo female founders because it is so bloody hard. So anyone, go and find a group of people who are like-minded to work with you on that journey. So I think, there's 3 things. You need the growth person, the product person, and the technology person. So if you can find those 3 key people, then you will set yourself up for success. It took me a number of years to find Kieran, my CTO. And then, I would have loved to have had a strong right-hand person to really help balance out Kieran and myself. Yep. So I do say, if you can share that journey, go ahead and do it.
And did you get those 3 people around you as a sort of an advisory group? Did you employ them, or how did that start?
So Kieran came on board as a CTO for paid work. At the time, he wasn't prepared to come in unpaid. So he came on as a paid CTO, then saw the value in what we were doing, and then switched to a sweat equity deal.
Okay, great.
But I still think go and find those advisors who have had startup, scale up experience as well as industry experience and put yourself around them. I see a lot of founders that actually haven't got the founders on their advisory committee. They've got people that have come from expertise, which is great, but you actually need someone that's been in there in the trenches and worked out how really, really hard it is. So if you can find that person to cry on your shoulders. I had a meeting this morning with someone who I'm helping from an advisory, and it was tears. It's like, we've been there, but it's how do you dust yourself up, get up and keep moving forward.
That's music to my ears, Georgie, because that's exactly what we try and do through Startup Shake-Up.
Exactly.
It's about bringing that expertise to the table and wrapping people around it so that as they move on their journey, it's like a surround sound advisory.
Correct. And if you can have that safe space to be transparent and honest and, you know, look deep into yourself, I think it's also a lot of people are really scared to make that next step because they don't believe in themselves. And I would say, if you don't believe in yourself, how would any investor or client potentially believe in you? So it's actually working on that why can't it be you who's the next person to found the next company? And also we need to stop thinking that we need billion-dollar companies. Why can't we have $100 million companies all employing hundreds of Australian employees? So I think that there's that mindset there as well.
Yeah. So stepping back to your journey then, what was your why, the inspiration behind you starting Springday?
Because I think that the way that we live and work was broken, and I think it's getting better. And I also think that the absence of illness is not an indicator of whether someone's well. And so I was exploring that. And if you take the 5 pillars, you're only as good as your worst sum. Like, you can't average us out and think, oh, I'm scoring 80, because if you're scoring really poorly on mental health, but you're doing really well in the other pillars, then you're only as good as your worst pillar. And I really thought that was something that needed to be explored. And that's what we really worked out. And that was my own personal journey as well. It was like, you know, I'm running half marathons and I'm thinking, well, what is my why? Why am I put on this earth? I think there's more to do in society. And that's when I said, I think that the 5 pillars of wellbeing need to be explored. Not being an expert, I went and surrounded myself by those experts, but understanding the technology, I could then go and actually have a look at what was the thinking at the time and wrap that around what I was trying to do. So it was a real learning opportunity, and to really switch the conversation from wealth down to health. And I think that that's really what's really important.
Really powerful. So what challenges did you find then moving into the health tech space?
So there was one of my clients, she said, it's like an alien talking, but no one's ready to understand you yet. And so it's that first thing that you can see what the future is. And I still think we've got this big problem in digital health, right? So there's 2 parts to it. One is who's going to pay for it. And the other one is how do you make it a pill and not a vitamin? And I think that moving into the corporate wellbeing market, we know there's CEOs that want to spend money on this space, but they're still not ready to do that. And you need to change the balance sheets to actually put people on the balance sheets in a more robust and structured way, rather than looking at the success of a company by how much money is in their bank accounts or what they're selling.
So how is it you go about it then when you're dealing with a new CEO that you're trying to convince to do this?
I think you need to think about what the board's saying. So the innovative companies that we were working with, they just get it and just say yes. Anyone that then they say this makes sense, anyone that then asks for an ROI of it, you know they're sort of on the edge and you need to attach a financial return to it. And then you've got industries that are just not ready for their people at all. And so really it's, unless you've got the CEO buy-in for what we were trying to do, and it's actually a board agenda and it's coming from the top down, then you really, really struggle to make headways. But times are turning, right? We've got a big push for more gender equity, diversity, inclusion. You know, we've got a shortage of skilled labor, so the time's starting to change. But for me, it was my own personal experience working at this management consulting company going back to 20 years ago. And you're like, is this it? Is this what I've spent 20 years of my life through school and university to get to the workforce? And it was completely underrated.
So in that build out from 2008 to 2019, what were some of your biggest yes moments, wow moments?
So winning the first client. So launching through Lululemon was a big yes, because it suggested that what we were trying to do had that product market fit and that validation to help from distribution. Then winning my first client in the B2B space was amazing. And then closing Australia Post is a really long, 6-year deal was also quite amazing. And then it's the word of mouth. So taking the product, sending it up into Asia and having the consumers come back to you, or the users, because we used to have a 3-pronged sales process. First one being you've got to sell to the wellbeing and HR. The second part being you needed to sell to the CFO to pay for it. And the third part, the individuals had to use it. And so it's actually quite a multifaceted sales process that we had.
So for somebody who was coming from outside the health tech space into the health tech space and doing so well, what are your observations at the moment around that health tech space and where it's going into the future?
I still think that there is the biggest question, who's going to pay? And so we're seeing that I'm not sure that health systems are ready to get involved yet. They've got some other system problems that are going on. I think you've then got to build a product that the consumers want. We've got to stop thinking of patients as patients and start looking at them as consumers, because they want to be using the tech, and what they're getting outside of health is just so far more superior. We've got a lot of understanding in the funding space. I don't think that there is a lot of funding for digital health at the moment, or understanding of what it is. And then, of course, you've got all these incredible IP for doctors or people in the health space, but they can't wrap themselves around with the right product and technology people. So it's how can you support them to build out the tech and not actually, and work out, is the IP in the methodology or the way that we're approaching health, or is the IP in the technology and innovative ways of doing things?
And when we're talking about health consumers, and also, that's okay, health consumers and also those like GPs who are using digital health,
yeah.
Do you think that there are issues we face in terms of digital literacy and digital ability?
So I'm not coming from rural, and to talk to Wes Callum, is he still on? I mean, bandwidth and access to broadband or, NBN is one of the first things. That if you've got all this stuff up in the cloud, how can you actually access the information and the things that you need, right? I do think health literacy. I'm involved in the Corporate Mental Health Alliance. I don't know that people understand the difference between mental health and mental illness. I don't know that people understand what psychological safety is. I don't know that there is a consistency as to how much we should move, how much we should eat. I think there is so much health information out there. We actually don't know where to start from a trusted, supported place. Like, what's that single source of truth to start with before we start to look at sharing of our data? I don't know the rollout of the My Electronic Health Record has been done very, very well. And I still think that, where is the government choosing to spend money in this space if we don't even have a centralized repository for where the health data belongs, and that we're comfortable that it's going to be safe and secure? So I think you're dealing with some of those health battles as well.
You're dealing with many, many issues through to
lots of stakeholders involved in health.
That's right. So coming back to your journey then, how did you know that it was time to step out of Springday and into something else?
So I think you need to look at, what am I really good at and what do I love doing? And that's probably creating the idea, working out this product market fit and starting to do that initial scale. We then did the investor shopping and went around a lot of the VCs investment here in Australia, and they don't like the platform that we had and how much human involvement needed to happen in health. So you can't just throw technology over the fence and hope that it sticks. You need to do a lot of stuff about strategy and relying on the companies that we're selling to for corporate and culture. And so the opportunity to scale through investment just wasn't as obvious. So yes, I could have had a business that was slowly, incrementally growing, but it's how do you get that bit more of a hyper growth? And we looked at it and thought that you need to have a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. And so the opportunity came to exit to a company that could pad out all, they're not deficiencies, but the areas of Springday that we weren't strong in.
Yep. And then how did you decide what to do next?
Do you mean as in once I'd left Springday, or do you mean, yes. So I still think that for the past 18 months, I've been working with a whole range of founders on this topic of digital health. And then I look at what is needed in the digital health space. And so the opportunity came because there's still a number of investors out there that are really interested in digital health, especially because it comes under the impact investing arm. And so there's a number of key people who I work with that we've all got different skill sets. And we sort of thought, rather than creating our own startup, how can we help those that are sort of at a stage of block or a stage of scale, and surround them with the right tools, expertise, growth, product and technology to help them build out their businesses. And so this is where it's an unofficial quasi venture studio that we've sort of aligned ourselves with, and then we'll see how that goes for the next couple of years before we significantly look to potentially raise some funds in that space.
Okay. And what sorts of things are you exploring? Are you open to anybody coming to you with ideas, or are you looking at particular aspects of tech health?
No, I'm open to anything at the moment. Probably something that could reasonably go into market that's direct to consumer. So I think that, you know, if I think about what the skill sets and what we've done, I've had strong experience in building smart health communities. So we got a big government grant from Diabetes New South Wales and Diabetes New South Wales and ACT. And so, I mean, that's just one, the major Australian Institute of Marketing Award for how we can activate and mobilize for digital health. And so that's where I think, rather than building a tech platform, it's how can we actually build smart health communities around those that need help to do with symptoms. So if I think about some of the research I've been doing into menopause, a female founder of a menopause company came to me and she said, I need help to scale. And I'm like, well, you're clearly the expert in menopause. I had no idea there are 48 different symptoms to solve for menopause. Yes. However, nutrition, sleep, like where's the importance of what those symptoms are? And so how can you build an IP or a health solution to tap into that? If we look at the tech and the distribution of that IP, a lot of it is quite similar. So you don't need to go and raise money to build the tech stack if we can share a tech stack amongst a whole range of different symptoms and founders. So it's maximizing the efficiencies across the digital health system, because I just know that interoperability is such a big thing. So how can we actually help build that out? And so that's probably where we're exploring at the moment. So it's probably addressing symptoms as opposed to building solutions.
Yep. Jess,
Right.
did you have a couple of questions?
Yeah, if that's okay, going straight, like right back to basics and this idea of IP. We've got a lot of people in our network at the moment looking, exploring this health tech space. And it's always a question that we get is like, when do you look at protecting your IP and your idea, especially when, like you're saying, there's not a lot of funding out there for this. And when you're approaching investors and these big organizations and everything to look at your idea and help you scale it, at what point do you start protecting that when it's just a concept, I guess?
So I think the first thing is in health is, where is the IP? Like Springday had no IP. Like we built a wellbeing check tool, but it wasn't, it's almost not patentable, but you knew that it had been validated through the universities. So I think that its evidence-based approach is probably where I look at health as to the importance. So does it say it's going to do what it's done on the hood? So for example, I'm on the advisory board of the Corporate Mental Health Alliance here in Australia. And basically they won't touch anything that doesn't have an evidence-based approach to it. So I would look to see in health, where does the IP sit? So is it something novel? Is it something that's patentable versus is it something that you've spent years validating to say that your approach is actually the right approach to move forward?
Yeah, they're really good considerations. And then in terms of getting the people on board as well, like on the other side of it, the people that you're surrounding yourself with, these like the person, your CTO, where did you find these people?
Word of mouth. And what
mouth.
I'm seeing a lot now is I think there are the opportunities to join different groups where you can, to say, I'm looking for a CTO or I'm looking for a co-founder. I mean, I think the Antler program is a really good program like that. I've invested in a couple of companies that have come out of that, where they've gone and got a whole bunch of like-minded people to come together and formed companies that way. So I think it's just, being mindful of what's your skill set, where do you find them, and then making sure that you can get out of the contracts, right? The last thing that you want is a bad marriage. The last thing you want is bad founders coming together. And so, you don't give up equity off the bat. You've got to earn your equity, and, you have to reach cliffs and hurdles and all this sort of stuff. So there's a lot of good, company structures to protect everyone involved.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And then going back on that, you have to back what you're claiming. Did you go to focus groups, or how did you get people to use that checklist almost for Springday and validate it for investors? Did you go through focus groups, or what was the process for that?
No, we went and got some university studies, so independent university studies to validate what we did. And being a portfolio company of Cicada Innovations as well, it helped us say, right, well, they're also shareholders of us, so they're actually helping to prove what we did actually did what it did under the hood. So I think
that's how you, I guess, paid. Was it? Like as a startup, I guess there's so many different ways, like different avenues that you can spend and invest that money, especially if the investment is not always a large investment. So did you find the value in going to the universities and with that portfolio company to come on board to help as shareholders?
Yes. So if you think about the tech voucher schemes and a lot of the university schemes out there, there is capital, like through a three-way partnership. I think it was a tech voucher. So you needed a corporate, you needed the startup, and then you needed the university to all come together and help to do that.
Okay.
But similarly, you could go and approach the unis and say, look, who are the masters? Who are the PhDs? Are they interested in working on this project? And I think that there are a lot of super innovative academics out there that want to get into this space, right? And so if you're prepared to give away a little bit of equity to achieve and to validate what it is that you're wanting to do, I think that's a super smart way. I think it's getting creative as how do you get some of this stuff funded, especially, if you can't wait to apply for commercializing Australia grants and sort of the other grants that are out there.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. There's just been a couple of comments I'll read out from the chat as well. So Callum has said, they're long ones, so there is a massive amount of health and environmental education that has to happen really quickly if quality of life is to survive. I'm working on a cartoon strip, a sort of foot rot flats on the science fiction without the fiction. The solutions are seemingly out of this world, and so are the different and these are so different from current reality. I'm interested in big health and big environmental issues because they are such a threat to everyone. I rely on copywriting. And then Caroline, do you have before I go to Caroline's comment, is there anything that you'd like to comment on that, Georgie?
So have you read Caroline's comment?
No, I'll do that.
Okay, I'll read it out. So
okay,
Caroline's the lady that ran the regional digital health. She says, apologies, she has to type because the microphone's not working. Any thoughts on how you as a single player can shape and influence the ecosystem for wellness and health? The key challenge of who pays comes down to ROI, which is driven by numbers of consumers uptake. To get that strong, I think we need to support integration across different health silos and also consider the psychosocial barriers to health uptake. Do you see these as barriers and areas for influence for system uplift? Thanks and love your work.
So it's interesting you say that. I actually proposed to the Digital Health CRC a couple of years ago to build an almost validated black box of digital health interventions. So you've got all these different suppliers that could come into a big black box. The unis can then prove whether it works or doesn't work and then spit it out the other end. Like from an MBS perspective, I think we're still 10 years away to get some of this stuff actually backed. But if you go to a doctor and they're prescribing a drug that you have to pay for out of your own pocket, whether or not it's on the PBS or not, you still have to pay for it. There is a transaction that's taking place. Where does the doctor basically say, I think you should also benefit from paying for this lifestyle intervention or this digital health intervention? And so we're already seeing that, you've got to pay for some stuff to look after your health. Do we expect the government for it to be free all the time? No. And I think that the digital health solutions that actually generate the behavior change will win in the end. But agree, you can't have a one size fits all. It's like the concept of Netflix. Okay, I'm trying one thing. Is it working or is it not working? But we have to constantly re-engage back with the consumer who's the patient with their health. And that's one of the biggest problems we've got in society right now.
And from your work, do you feel that you've come across particular psychosocial barriers that people have to engaging in that kind of behaviour?
number one, where's the data going, right? So, from an employer perspective, do I trust that my employer is actually going to do the right thing by me? Is it going to procure me from getting insurance, getting a job, and all these other things? And so I think you need to work out where you are on that continuum and that spectrum.
And then Reno's asking, I've done a workshop with And Health. Is there a role here for the Australian Institute of Digital Health?
I don't know the Australian Institute of Digital Health well. I think they're coming up with the frameworks. I was involved in some of their mental health frameworks. And health, 100%, definitely. I mean, they have just, raised all that capital. So I would 100% believe that And Health will be part of this solution. And so I do think that we need to adopt it. But fundamentally, users will make their own decision if they want to use something. Doctors will make their own decision if they wish to suggest something. And I can't see the government paying for this until much stronger, robust bodies of evidence have actually come through to say this stuff works.
Research Centre.
Pardon?
Which comes back again to the Cooperative Research Centre for Digital Health that you were talking about before.
Correct.
Reno, did you want to add something to that? You're on mute still.
Hello. Hello, Georgie. Thank you for the presentations. So our guest is GP in Wangaratta, but I also set up a startup company, which I did training with And Health, but I missed the master class. So I'm in the middle of doing a deal with a partnership program, but they asked me a lot, because the problem is I'm still solopreneurship. I do doctor work every day, but I also do my own computer coding 3 hours per day. So the website's already launched. The problem is they ask me lots of questions about digital health security. For example, if there's a policy of data protocol, data breach protocol policy, which I don't have any formal IT background in that. So my problem is, for pre-revenue company, would you advise someone like me to hire someone as a full-time employee where we don't know where is the the future of the startup company in the first place, or you just hire as a contractor?
It's always safer, I think, to hire as a contractor, as long as you're setting yourself up that if you do qualify for the R&D tax benefits, then you can actually qualify that way. Because Australian law is such that the contractor relationship, well, assuming that they're not an independent contractor and they're considered an employee anyway, but if you're hiring them under a PTY LTD sort of arrangement, then that's very clear. If they're not delivering, you can turn off that service, but having employees comes with a whole range of responsibilities, which is also a good thing if you're set up and have got the cash flow to keep supporting that as well.
Yeah. And I also had 3 months ago, I got approached by local commerce, and they said you can get 25,000 grant from New South Wales government, but part of the requirement is you have someone else to invest in the company for the same match to grant 25,000. Like, I'm not ready to give up my share yet. It's not even, it's still pre-revenue.
And I think that's the biggest thing that founders need to work out. Am I prepared to have something little of something that's bigger, or when is the right time to get investment? And there'll be a lot of signaling to a whole range of different, which is why the government would say, we will prepare, if someone else backs your idea, we will then support that as well. So it's almost external validation that you can get third-party investment to come in, which then gives them comfort that they're investing in the right sort of thing as well.
The thing too, also, before you launch it market, you have to test it to several people. Because my primary initial market is going to be GPs.
Yep.
I have to pay them up to test it.
Well, can you share with me what your idea is and what's the problem you're looking to solve?
It's a collaborative platform. GP does mental health care plan, chronic disease management plan, health assessment, drug and alcohol, which I do all the time anyway because I'm working in community health. So this is a collaborative plan. That's the software is not only run by the GP, but also different allied health psychiatrists. They don't have to share all data, but at least they have a cloud-based platform they can work together, skin cancer and lots of patient education program and automation too. For example, GP check the cholesterol for the past 6 months with alarm the patient and GP, so it's not checked only by the GP itself. So, so I'm trying to patch it up with another GP software, which tells our attended Telstra hackathon. They try to So I'm a bit protective with the IP because they're a big company. I'm just single entrepreneur. And then I'm trying to sell it to what do you call it, with another GP software to do collaborative work. But they have all the resources. I got nothing except my brain.
So do you think the IP, to talk to IP, or your unique selling proposition, is the way that information is delivered, or is it the ease? Why couldn't
It's the
Salesforce just go
ease, time, and collaboration and automation.
Yeah. And so I would then say, right, if you want to go super, super fast and actually own that space,
Yeah.
how would you go and raise more capital, bring it in and do it full time to get there faster? So that's that whole speed to market as an opportunity, so that if there's a need there, how do you protect it so that you're the guy that owns that space and someone doesn't come in and gazump you with more money and more resources?
Yeah, I already talked to an IP lawyer. I got the trademark, but it's hard to get a patent because most of the coding is, it's everywhere. It's hard to prove to someone that you have a short codes that is different from people.
Agree. I've been there. I understand your pain.
Yeah. So because it's a patent can always be copied, and especially I'm interested with your company because you go to different countries. And I'm background in Asia. In Asia, they copy everything. Actually, the GP software, there's somebody copying it in Indonesia, for example. So I have to protect that over the, outside of Australia, because patent, I think trademark patent only stay within Australia. You have to do the international patent and trademark as well.
So, Reno, I think as you're based in Wangaratta, what I'll do is I'll get Jess to reach out to you and make you aware of what we've got available in the startup shake-up space, and then maybe we can put you in touch with Georgie offline to have a more in-depth conversation offline. Georgie, if you're talking about people who are moving into health tech space at the moment, should they be looking at particular cohorts like aging or people with disabilities or NDIS, or are they better off just looking at the whole thing?
Once again, I'd work out who's paying. And I think if you do your startup business modeling, you'll work out, do I have a viable business model based off of any cohort, right? So you can make money off of any problem. The question is, who will pay? So I'd spend the time and energy. If you say, I want to do aging at home, or I want to do NDIS, or I want to do diabetes, or, menopause, whatever it could be, you need to make sure that you've proven out the business model of who will be paying for it. I would caution people that go and build product without understanding who's going to buy it. And that's what I often see is beautiful tech stacks that have been built and no one's using it.
Yeah.
I've worked with some companies that have raised, millions upon millions of dollars and are still pre-revenue. That doesn't make sense to me. So how can you actually tweak it to actually make sure that someone is going to buy what it is that you're building?
And what would your advice be, your top advice for health startups that you haven't already given us?
I think for anyone doing a startup, make sure you surround yourself with the right people to help question your thinking so that you're constantly being challenged to move forward, and then work out who's going to pay. I think that's really tough in health.
And I'll ask one more question, then I'll open it up to the floor.
Sure.
We are trying to build a regional innovation system here. Well, we are in the middle of it. We're building out in particular fields, and health will be one of those fields. In relation to health tech startups, we risk having one that flies and goes really quick. How important is it that they are surrounded by others of a like mind doing a like kind of thing that are here geographically, or can that be addressed digitally?
I think it is. If we look at health, I don't think there's so many comorbidities and so many reasons coming in, right? And so if you want to do that one thing extremely well, it's what are the interrelation dependencies and relationships between the other stuff. So the more that you're building on the concept of interoperability, the better the whole solution will be. And I think that is, how can you build an ecosystem that's working collaboratively versus working in our silo? Whereas historically people try and make money by doing it all. I think that if we can sort of say, I wish to be part of the solution, and I'm going to do my thing really well and validate that, but building for a ecosystem approach, I think that's where you'll win. And
Yeah.
I think the more that like-minded people, even if it's regionally, can all come together and think we're going to solve this problem, because regionally you can then influence all the stakeholders in your area and prove that it's going to work.
Yeah.
So, if you get Reno and all his GPs on board, then you can move forward with having someone who's at the center. And I think with health, we have to put the patient back at the center of their care portals, patient-centric care, or how are they as a consumer and what do they need right now?
And that's music to my ears, because I'm going to put the finger on John, if you're with us. He and I share a group called the Digital Futures Coordination Group, and we were the ones that got Caroline doing the digital health survey across the region, and we're focusing now on digital health. There's going to be a working group, and we're going to get industry around the table as well. John, are you with us? Do you have a question? And I'd like to ask everybody to turn their cameras on. And in the meantime, Callum, did you have a question there? Oh, you've just taken a mouthful.
So to talk to that, I think that there's an argument to say the spend is currently going through the MBS, right? And I'm a big believer that you need high touch and high tech. And I don't believe that digital alone is a solution when you are trying to create rapport with patients. And so I do think you need to check in. And sometimes having a face-to-face conversation is very different to having Zoom. And they'll start to unpack a whole bunch of stuff in front of a doctor that they would not necessarily have been able to do if we start thinking of humans as humans. And so I think that there is the opportunity to think about how allied health, GPs and everything can come together to try and solve for digital health before we keep referring out to specialists. So how can we triage the health system? Reno's probably at his wit's end with patients. We know that there's a shortage of supply of doctors, but how can we triage the needs to bring in health coaches and nurse practitioners and other people to build out some of these roles, but looking at data as a centralized source that we can all look at the data and see, well, no, we need interventions now, or using AI to actually build out on that. But I've interrupted. So
one of the things that I'm concerned about in trying to promote health tech as being a major part of the system is that people will look at it and see savings, and that they will say, no, we don't need people there, we can use the tech instead. Is that something that you've found? I
think that if the tech works, you would use tech. If the tech's not working, you don't use tech. So we did a study, and to talk to John's point, I agree with you. I don't think we should be looking at prevention. I think we need to look at early intervention. So I think that's where the market's at right now. So if I was trying to do a preventative health startup, which is where I came from, it's really hard. Whereas if you can prove that early intervention, that there is an intervention there that works, then the government will look to pay for it. I know all the insurers are looking for it. And I appreciate only 50% of the Australian population has insurance, but the insurers are now looking to start paying for that. The corporates are looking to start paying for that. So I would look to that point. And sorry, I got distracted with what the question was.
That's okay. And John's saying, the funding model is broken and we do need to be focusing on prevention. We do have 2 universities in the region, which is really good as well.
Yeah, perfect.
Callum, did you have a question? You finished your mouthful now. Sorry about that, Phil. You're just still on mute.
Yeah, look, I think that the big issue is about trust at the moment. Trust in health, like say with the anti-vaxxers and all that sort of stuff. There's a whole lot of misinformation, a whole lot of hurdles that we've got to try and get around, and also to do with digital trust as well. There's a hell of a lot of people really getting more and more concerned about the safety of the digital environment as well. So. But even like, I suppose I get concerned too that there's an urgency from an environmental perspective that we really only have 10 years to get, and they've been saying that several times now, but it's becoming really pressing now that we've got 10 years to make a whole lot of health and environmental changes, because otherwise we're going to be really in strife. So I just wondered if you had any sort of thoughts on that narrowing of the window that is starting to apply to commercial solutions.
Yeah, I feel that so often as well, because of the trust and because of the security and all this other stuff, we can't try innovative things because you've got to build on this robust platform first before you can try stuff to come off the top. And so therefore, interventions that I see are still like from the 1980s are still being used, but we need to just start fresh, and with tech where it's at now, move forward. But it's who is the big brands, or where's the money to come from to actually back a lot of that?
And I think what Caroline's saying then there is that health tech entrepreneurs need to be at the table when we bring all the influencers together in an integrated system. We've got too many siloed conversations, and then of course we've got Callum's point around trust.
Yeah.
So building on that comment then, from your perspective, Georgie, what would be your top advice at the moment for anyone wanting to step into the health tech space, both as an entrepreneur and also as people who are building a health tech innovation system?
You guys are building the health tech innovation system. Identify what it is that you want, what are the pieces, and then go and work out, do the pieces exist? Let's not reinvent the wheel. How do we then bring the pieces together, or where the hole is, to actually create the new innovation to come through? And then if I was a health tech entrepreneur trying to do that, I would say, do I have the money to go direct to consumer to bypass the health system? So do I have something that someone will definitely want to buy because it's going to keep them alive, or they've got value? What's the value exchange there? And then if I am building that, how can I also have a secondary hat to plug into the health system? Because if we think about lifestyle apps, and I say lifestyle apps with sleep, nutrition, that data doesn't need to be your health data. It's a lifestyle. And this is where you differentiate between what I see as health and medicine. So if you've got early intervention, there's a whole range of interventions that can be done that have got nothing to do with the health system. So you've got, physiological, pharmacological, and psychological. Those interventions can actually sit outside of health, but then you've got the medicine, the prescribing of the drugs or whatever to go with that, or the drawing of the blood, or the owning of that health data. So there's almost a fine line between what is in health and this early intervention side before we need to do proper chronic disease management. And
the early intervention side then becomes much more complicated because you have many more players who are involved in that space. Correct.
And so that's where, if we're building for interoperability, and if you're building this trusted ecosystem that then can be modeled, some of the conversations I've had recently are very familiar with the Kaiser Permanente model over in the US, right? That's when they own everything. So they own the pathology, they own the radiology, they own the GP practices, they own the specialists, because then there's transparency of sharing of the data through it all, rather than hitting the roadblock as to where the data needs to go.
And where the data needs to go, and what data is included, and where it's stored, and how safe it is, and so
Correct.
on and so forth. So
but I think, the blockchain, to talk to it, the blockchain now will really, and digital in the cloud will really help to, potentially improve a lot of that.
So you see the blockchain as having a major role to play in this going forwards?
I think absolutely, because it's it's that trust thing, right? It's in the blockchain. That's where the trust is. So you'll need to build systems around that, because you don't want all your health data just out there randomly on the blockchain. But that will be your single source of truth, that you can't go and necessarily hack it. And that's where, do we trust that governments can actually build robust systems, or do we trust that organizations from overseas can build robust systems? To talk to all the chat and the comments, a lot of it comes down to trust.
Yeah, absolutely, particularly at the moment. Does anybody have a last question?
Yeah, one of the things on the preventative side of health is that we think at the moment only 1 in 1,000 food complaints, whether that's food poisoning, foreign objects, poor food handling, or allergic reactions, actually ever gets reported to the health authorities at the local government level. And the digital capacity's been there. Most people are carrying mobile phones and things, and at the moment it's still taking about a month to get official notifications back through to the council from doctors and this sort of thing. So there's huge opportunities there to be proactive and be preventative, and it's in the really broad public interest, but there's still no one actually really pushing or promoting that space. So certainly preventative health is a really, really hard thing to market, because and building community as well. It's another thing. I heard an interesting thing about creation of community, what was it? It was like a community square in a digital environment where where communities, you didn't have to be on a particular website or whatever. It was to actually create a bit of a base for open and non-commercial discussions about things, which was interesting. But anyway,
thanks.
Yeah.
So that's our regional conversation that we need to have. Reno, did you have a last question?
Yes, all this investment on health tech based on Australian digital health, they are focused more on hospital-based, but not much on primary care or community-based. And the other thing, everybody talk about health tech. I cannot even get my older patient to use a cell phone. How do you work it out? Because I'm trying to do Internet of Things, blood pressure, so I can check the blood pressure here, or the split, electronic split. They don't even use cell phone. How do you do that? And intellectual disability, they cannot use cell phone too. How do you get around that?
And
No, I
think-
agree. Massive problems to solve. I think rural and remote, aging population, you know, all of that. We can't forget those people when we're designing health systems, but we also need to realize that there is going to be so many digital natives coming through that we don't want the appointment to get a great example, doing some stuff with a founder out of the NHS in the UK. It can take you 3 weeks to get into a doctor to ask a simple question, which maybe can be done asynchronously through a health coach without needing the doctor to do that. But a person is having a really bad experience for 3 weeks during that time frame because you've got a blocker of access to expertise.
Yeah.
So how can we actually create a different model or a different system to help with a lot of that?
Yeah.
And why that's a problem is because our funding model is a fee for service. There's no provider number for a doctor to answer a question that's come in via an app to help them with a solution, right? You've got to go face to face to have the appointment. And I'm not trying to remove the face to face, but there's a part to say, I just really want a quick answer that I've got to wait 3 weeks to get in, or I'm relying on Dr. Google to move forward with, you know, some symptoms and early intervention tracking.
So it's about where we're building the most effective solutions to support the best healthcare for everybody. Yeah,
correct.
Absolutely. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic, Georgie. You've certainly given me food for thought. I'm going to come back and pick your brains where we're busy building out this health tech system and the ecosystem. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. But most of all, Georgie, thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your expertise. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, and ping me any questions. Happy to keep chatting about it. Very passionate. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Lovely. Well, we'll see you again then. Okay.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.